So my passion and the work of the Centre for Early Childhood stems from one essential truth: that the love we feel in our earliest years fundamentally shapes who we become and how we thrive as adults.
One DNA test destroyed Kate Middleton's world in seconds. The name on the report made her scream. When William saw it, he broke down sobbing because he had always known, deep down. The royal family has been hiding someone with Diana's blood, someone they tried to erase, and what this person is about to reveal will bring the entire monarchy crashing down. You won't believe who it is. A plain white envelope arrived at Kensington Palace one ordinary morning, nestled among the usual stack of official correspondence and ceremonial invitations.
And use my platform for good. And whenever I'm doing stuff, I'm constantly analysing where best can I use my platform for the greatest impact. And talking about the Earthshot was always
At first glance, it appeared unremarkable. Just another piece of mail in the daily routine of royal life. However, something about this particular envelope immediately felt different to Kate Middleton as she sorted through the morning's deliveries. The envelope bore no return address and carried an unusual wax seal, thick and deep red in colour, unlike the standard royal crest she had grown accustomed to seeing. The handwriting across the front was distinctive, slanted and deliberate, clearly not the polished script of palace staff that typically handled official communications. As Kate held the envelope, a sense of unease settled over her. It was not mere curiosity that made her hesitate, but rather an instinctive feeling that whatever lay inside held significance beyond the ordinary. For a brief moment, she considered setting it aside, perhaps dismissing it as a misdelivered document or something that could wait until later. Yet something compelled her forward, an inexplicable pull that made it impossible to simply walk away. With her heart beating faster than usual, she carefully opened the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper, crisp and official in appearance. There was no accompanying note, no explanation, just the document itself. Across the top, printed in bold black letters, were the words that would change everything. Confidential DNA report. The paper began to tremble in Kate's hands before she had even read past the heading. Her breath caught in her throat as her eyes moved down the page. Names appeared. Names she recognized immediately. Diana Spencer was listed, alongside another name she had never encountered before, but knew instinctively she would never forget. The document was filled with clinical language and scientific terminology, the kind of cold, dispassionate phrasing typical of laboratory reports. Genetic markers were listed, percentages calculated, conclusions drawn. Each line of text seemed to cut through her thoughts with increasing intensity. The phrasing remained objective and detached throughout, but the implication thundered through every fibre of her being. According to the results presented in the report, there was a confirmed genetic match, a biological connection that had never been meant to come to light. Kate read the document again, then once more, as if repeated reading might somehow change what was written there. Her hands began shaking violently. She felt her knees weaken beneath her, and before she fully realized what was happening, she had sunk into the nearest chair. She clutched the report against her chest as though the physical pressure might somehow make it disappear, as though she could crush it into dust and erase the truth it contained. But the words remained, their meaning refusing to fade from her consciousness. The revelation screamed at her in the silence of the room, forcing its way into every corner of her mind. Her fingers continued to tremble, her chest heaving with the effort of breathing. Without consciously realizing it, tears had begun streaming down her face. They came not just from shock, but from a complex mixture of emotions: grief for secrets long buried, confusion about what this meant for everything she thought she knew, and a profound sense of betrayal that such information had been hidden for so long. The quiet of the palace room seemed to mock her distress. Somewhere down the hall, she could hear her children laughing, their voices bright with the innocent joy of play. They had no idea that their mother sat frozen just rooms away, her world fracturing around her. Kate's thoughts raced in frantic circles, colliding with memories she had long since filed away as insignificant. Suddenly, moments from the past took on new meaning. She recalled sideways glances from Charles during family dinners, brief looks she had never quite understood but had dismissed as nothing important. There were strange silences that fell whenever Diana's name came up in conversation, awkward pauses that everyone seemed to navigate around without acknowledging. Over the years, she had overheard whispers from palace staff, fragments of conversations that she had always attributed to gossip and speculation. The royal family naturally attracted rumors, she had reasoned, and not everything people said deserved attention. But now, holding this document in her shaking hands, everything shifted into a different focus. What if those glances had not been random? What if those silences had been deliberate? What if the whispers had contained more truth than fiction? The possibility that all these small, overlooked moments had been breadcrumbs leading to this revelation was almost too much to process. This was not simply a surprising discovery or an interesting piece of historical information. This was a rupture, a violent split between the reality she had understood and believed in and a hidden history that the monarchy had apparently worked to keep buried. The more Kate tried to make logical sense of what she was reading, the more she realized this discovery was not some isolated secret from a tragic past, disconnected from the present. It was a puzzle piece, one that Diana had somehow hidden in plain sight, a piece that Kate was never supposed to find. But she had found it, and there was no way to know what she now knew. The truth stared back at her from the page in black and white, undeniable and unchangeable. As the weight of Diana's secret pressed down on her, making it difficult to catch her breath, Kate began to understand that this was not merely about uncovering something from the past. This felt like a blueprint, a map to understanding things about the future that she had never been meant to see. Diana had tried to leave warnings, Kate realized. Throughout her life and in the years since her death, Diana had left traces, hints, messages that most people had interpreted as the confused thoughts of an unhappy woman. But what if they had been deliberate? What if Diana had been trying to ensure that eventually someone would understand what she had discovered? Kate thought of Diana's interviews, her carefully worded statements, the diary entries that had been displayed publicly but perhaps never truly understood. Now Kate saw these elements differently. She recognized herself as perhaps the person Diana had been hoping would eventually find the truth. Whether through intention or fate, Kate had stumbled upon evidence that Diana must have carefully preserved, knowing that one day it might surface. As she sat in that chair, the report still gripped in her trembling hands, Kate realized that her late mother-in-law had left behind more than memories and public sentiment. Diana had left behind proof, documentation, a trail for someone brave enough to follow it. The question was no longer whether the secret was real. The evidence in her hands confirmed its reality beyond doubt. The questions now were far more complicated. Why had this been buried so deeply? Who else had known about it? How far did the cover-up extend? And most pressingly, what was Kate supposed to do with this information now that she possessed it? Haunted by the implications of what she had discovered and driven by Diana's cryptic messages, Kate knew instinctively that there was only one place where the complete truth might still exist. It would be found within the walls where Diana had once lived, where she had cried, and where she may have hidden her deepest fears and most dangerous secrets. The Spencer family estate at Althorpe held more than just memories and historical artifacts. Somewhere within its numerous rooms and corridors, Kate believed, lay the remaining pieces of this puzzle that Diana had left behind. The trip to Althorpe was arranged with careful discretion, wrapped in vague language and diplomatic explanations that would not raise suspicion. Officially, the visit was described as a much-needed retreat, a brief escape from the relentless attention of public life and the demanding schedule of royal duties. Kate's staff presented it as a personal moment of reflection, a chance to connect with Diana's memory in a meaningful way. But in truth, Kate was not seeking peace or contemplation. She was on a hunt, searching for evidence that might confirm or expand upon what the DNA report had revealed. As the black iron gates of the estate closed behind her vehicle, Kate understood that she was not simply visiting Diana's childhood home. She was entering what might be the only place that still held unfiltered truth, preserved away from the sanitized official records and carefully managed public narratives. Althorpe was sacred ground for multiple reasons. It was where Diana had grown up, where she had returned throughout her life, and where her memory was most carefully preserved. It was also, Kate suspected, where secrets had been stored away from the prying eyes of the palace establishment. Upon arrival, Kate maintained her composure, keeping her expression neutral and her stated purpose deliberately vague. She made polite conversation, toured the familiar spaces, and behaved exactly as expected for someone paying respects to her late mother-in-law's legacy. But when evening fell and most of the estate's staff had retired for the night, Kate made her move. She had arranged a discreet conversation with an aging housekeeper, a woman who had served Diana faithfully during her lifetime and who had remained at Althorpe in the years since. The housekeeper listened as Kate carefully explained what she was searching for, though Kate was cautious not to reveal too much about what she had already discovered. The older woman's eyes narrowed slightly as she considered the request, and Kate could see the internal debate playing out across her weathered features. She was weighing risks, considering loyalties, perhaps thinking about promises made long ago. But something in Kate's expression, a combination of determination and genuine concern for Diana's memory, seemed to soften the housekeeper's resolve. With a slow, deliberate nod, the woman gestured for Kate to follow her. They walked through a section of the estate that felt forgotten, less frequently used than the main halls and public rooms. The corridor they entered was long and narrow, stretching into shadows, ending at a door that appeared to have been overlooked for years. The brass handle was tarnished, nearly fused by time and neglect. The housekeeper did not follow Kate any further. She simply placed a trembling hand on the doorframe and whispered words that sent chills down Kate's spine. "She always said you'd come." Behind the door, the air felt different, heavy with age and stillness, as though time itself had paused decades ago and never resumed its normal flow. The room was filled with shelves lined with aging boxes and neatly organized files, all covered with a fine layer of dust that suggested they had not been disturbed in years. But it was a small cluster of boxes in the far corner that immediately drew Kate's attention. They were tied with faded ribbons, and on the side of each box, written in Diana's unmistakable handwriting, were words that made Kate's heart stop. "For Catherine, when the time is right." That time, Kate understood, was now. She approached the boxes with deliberate care, treating them almost reverently. Opening the first box too quickly felt somehow wrong, as though tearing through the past with impatience might damage something precious. Inside, she found letter after letter, all written in Diana's hand. The handwriting showed signs of urgency and emotion, wavering in places, pressed hard into the paper in others. The tone was confessional, raw, like the desperate outpouring of a woman who needed to preserve the truth before it could be stolen or distorted. Diana's words recounted secret meetings that had never been publicly documented. She wrote about unexplained absences from official duties, gaps in her schedule that she had apparently used for purposes no one in the palace knew about. There were coded references throughout the letters to a man she described as trustworthy, someone she relied upon more than anyone within the palace walls. Diana's language was careful, but clear enough that Kate could understand what she was implying without it being spelled out in explicit terms. Tucked carefully between the pages of these letters were photographs, grainy and faded with age. They had the quality of images taken in secret, captured quickly without professional equipment or proper lighting. In multiple frames appeared a man standing beside Diana. He was never quite centered in the photographs, always positioned at the edges or slightly behind, but he was consistently present. His face was unfamiliar to Kate, not someone she recognized from official photographs or historical records of Diana's life. What struck Kate most powerfully about these images was the unmistakable sense of closeness between Diana and this man. Their posture in the photographs suggested an intimacy that could not be faked or posed. There was a comfort in how they stood near each other, a familiarity in their body language that spoke of genuine connection. In some images, Diana's expression was softer than Kate had ever seen in public photographs, her guard clearly lowered in ways it never was when official cameras were present. As Kate continued through the contents of the boxes, she found more documents, more photographs, more pieces of a story that had been deliberately hidden. Then came the final, most significant discovery. At the bottom of one box lay a sealed envelope, marked simply with the word DNA written across its front in Diana's handwriting. Kate's hands trembled as she carefully opened it, though part of her already knew what she would find inside. The documents within this envelope mirrored the report she had received at Kensington Palace. The same type of laboratory language, the same genetic markers, the same conclusion presented in clinical scientific terms. But this was different in one crucial way. This was not some mysterious document sent by an unknown source. This was evidence that Diana herself had possessed, that she had deliberately sought out and carefully preserved. Diana had known. She had not simply suspected or wondered. She had obtained proof, scientific confirmation of whatever truth she had uncovered. This archive Kate was reading through was not simply a diary or a collection of personal memories. It was a dossier, carefully assembled and deliberately preserved. The implications were staggering. Diana had not just stumbled upon this information. She had investigated, gathered evidence, and ensured that documentation would survive her. She had left it behind not merely as proof of what had happened, but as a warning to anyone who might eventually discover it. But what chilled Kate most profoundly was not just the content of what Diana had written and preserved. It was the question of who this man was, the one who appeared in photograph after photograph, the one Diana had protected and hidden. His face had been erased from official records, his existence apparently scrubbed from the historical account of Diana's life. Yet here he was, present in image after image, clearly significant in Diana's life in ways that had never been publicly acknowledged. Kate studied the photographs more carefully. A disturbing realization began to form. There was something familiar about the man's features, something that tugged at her memory, though she could not immediately place it. The shape of his eyes, the line of his jaw, certain aspects of his appearance seemed to echo features she knew from somewhere else. The resemblance was not obvious at first glance, but the more she looked, the more connections her mind began to make. The photographs that Kate discovered among Diana's hidden archive were unlike anything that would typically be associated with a woman living under constant public scrutiny. These were not formal portraits or carefully staged images designed for public consumption. Instead, they were candid shots, intimate moments captured with what appeared to be trembling hands and concealed cameras. The quality suggested they had been taken quickly, perhaps in stolen moments when privacy could be briefly secured. The man who appeared beside Diana in frame after frame remained a mystery in almost every conceivable way. He was tall and composed in his bearing, with a posture that appeared slightly detached, yet somehow protective. In every photograph, he seemed to be watching Diana with unmistakable care, a guardedness that went beyond casual friendship or professional association. His face was foreign to Kate, not matching anyone from the official record of Diana's acquaintances or companions. Yet simultaneously, his features were not entirely unfamiliar. There was something unsettling in the particulars of his appearance. The shape of his eyes carried a certain intensity. The curve of his cheekbones suggested aristocratic lineage. The defiant set of his jaw spoke of determination and perhaps stubbornness. It was a face that somehow conveyed both belonging and not belonging, as though he existed in a space between recognized categories. When Kate stared at the photographs long enough, allowing her mind to make connections without forcing them, the resemblance began to emerge with disturbing clarity. The similarity was not to William, nor even to Charles as he had appeared in his younger years. Instead, Kate found herself thinking of Harry. Not the Harry of the present day, but rather an older, more weathered version. She imagined Harry aged by years of hardship, marked by distance, and perhaps haunted by secrets. The likeness grew sharper the more she considered it. The more Kate read through Diana's letters and studied the photographs side by side, the worse her suspicions became. Diana's letters, those hurried confessions written in moments of desperate honesty, spoke of this man in language that shifted noticeably from her usual tone. Throughout her writings about royal life, Diana had often employed guarded sarcasm and biting humour. Her public weariness and frustration came through clearly in most of her private correspondence. But when she mentioned this particular man, all of that defensive posturing vanished. Her writing became softer, more vulnerable. The protective instinct in her words was palpable, almost maternal in its intensity. Yet at times, the language took on unmistakably romantic undertones. She described late-night conversations held in secret, whispered fears shared in borrowed moments away from watchful eyes. Diana wrote about exchanging secrets with this man, creating a bond forged in mutual understanding of what it meant to exist outside the accepted boundaries of royal life. One sentence in particular struck Kate with devastating force. Diana had written, "He carries more of me than anyone knows, and because of that, they will never allow him to exist." The meaning behind those words was not subtle or deeply hidden. Diana was practically declaring the truth outright, preserving it in writing for someone to eventually find and understand. The implications that Kate had been trying to avoid confronting directly now became impossible to deny. This was not merely a companion who had provided Diana with emotional support during difficult times. This was not some fleeting friendship formed in the isolation of royal misery. Diana had protected this man deliberately and passionately, with the fierce devotion of someone safeguarding something infinitely precious. The suggestion of secret paternity hung over every word Diana had written, heavy and undeniable in its presence. The fact that this man had completely vanished from every public trace only reinforced what Kate was beginning to accept as truth. He had been scrubbed from press coverage, removed from archives, erased even from the whispered gossip that typically survived in court circles. Such thorough elimination of someone's existence required deliberate effort and significant resources. It was the kind of erasure that only powerful institutions could accomplish. Kate's pulse quickened as she laid one of the clearer photographs directly beside the DNA report on the table before her. Her world seemed to tilt on its axis once again. This was not rumor or speculation built on nothing. This was not conspiracy theory spun from imagination. The evidence before her was tangible, documented, preserved by Diana herself. This was a prophecy that Diana had known would never be spoken aloud, not until the right person with sufficient courage and position forced it into the light. Kate understood with absolute clarity that she was meant to be that person. Armed with Diana's warnings, the photographs, and the DNA evidence, Kate knew she had no choice but to confront the one individual who might confirm what seemed impossible and who simultaneously had the most to lose if the truth became public. She chose her moment with surgical precision, understanding that timing and setting would be crucial. There could be no staff members present to overhear, no official business to provide interruption or distraction. Just the two of them, Kate and King Charles, separated by years of protocol and tradition, but now united by a secret that threatened to detonate the monarchy from its very foundations. Kate entered the private room not as the Duchess of Cambridge or the future Queen Consort, not as a subordinate member of the royal family following established hierarchy. She entered as a woman armed with undeniable proof and carrying decades' worth of silenced pain that was no longer hers alone to bear. Charles sat in his customary composed manner, his expression carefully neutral and unreadable. The metaphorical weight of the crown seemed permanently fixed upon his shoulders, so much a part of him that it appeared fused to his very being. Kate dispensed with pleasantries entirely. She laid the photographs on the table before him, one after another. Then came the letters, Diana's own words preserved in her distinctive handwriting. Finally, she placed the DNA report down, completing the presentation of evidence. It was arranged like exhibits in a trial that Charles had never expected to face. His hands remained still on the arms of his chair. His eyes flicked downward briefly, scanning the materials with what appeared to be only cursory interest before he leaned back with a dry, unimpressed sigh. Conspiracies, he muttered dismissively, his tone suggesting tired familiarity with such accusations. Diana's old delusions. But Kate had not come to be dismissed or redirected. She had not gathered this evidence and made this confrontation only to be waved away with convenient explanations. She picked up one of Diana's letters and began to read aloud, her voice steady despite the fury she kept carefully disguised beneath each measured syllable. As Diana's words filled the room, as her confessions clawed their way back into the palace through the determination of the daughter-in-law who had discovered them, something shifted in Charles's demeanor. The tightness in his jaw loosened slightly. His eyes dropped for just a moment too long, betraying the careful control he was attempting to maintain. Kate saw it clearly, that crack in his armor, the fault line beneath his carefully constructed indifference. He was no longer pretending he had never encountered these words before. Instead, he was preparing himself for what would inevitably come next. The confrontation did not take long to reach its critical moment. When Kate reached the passage in Diana's letter about the man they had erased from history, Charles exhaled in a sound that conveyed more defeat than denial. He did not shout or argue or attempt to construct elaborate explanations. He simply closed his eyes for a long moment and said quietly, yes, he was real. The air in the room seemed to thicken immediately, charged with the enormous weight of his confession. Charles spoke slowly after that, as if each word required immense effort to produce. He confirmed the man's existence, acknowledged his closeness to Diana, and described the quiet agreement forged among those who believed that protecting the institution was more important than revealing uncomfortable truths. Documents had been deliberately buried. Mentions of this man had been systematically erased from records. Over time, the silence had become standard policy, so entrenched that it no longer required active enforcement. It was not done to hurt her, Charles said flatly, his tone suggesting he believed this justification adequate. It was done to preserve the institution. But that explanation, delivered with such cold mechanical reasoning, struck Kate like a physical blow. She rose from her chair, her eyes burning with barely contained emotion, her voice breaking slightly as she tore through the final remaining veil of royal diplomatic language. "You let her die under the weight of a secret she begged someone to carry," Kate said, her words coming faster now, fueled by righteous anger. "You let her drown while you polished the image of the crown." Her accusation did not merely target Charles personally. She was speaking for every moment Diana had been called unstable, for every instance she had been dismissed as fragile or emotional when she had in truth been screaming desperately to be heard and believed. Standing there in that moment, Kate realized she had become part of the same machinery that had ground Diana down, at least until this very moment. Charles did not fight back against her words. He offered no further explanation or defense. His silence spoke louder than any argument he might have constructed. For the first time, Kate saw him not as a monarch or as her father-in-law, but simply as a man who had made a choice. Not a choice born of ignorance or lack of understanding, but one of deliberate complicity. He was a man who had watched the woman he had once married unravel in public view, while privately working to ensure that the secret she carried would never see daylight. As Charles sat in cold silence following Kate's confrontation, she saw him transformed in her mind from a powerful monarch into simply a man who had chosen institutional power over human truth. But now another impossible choice loomed before them, and this time it would fall to William to decide which path the future would take. Kate knew she had to share what she had discovered with her husband, but the timing and manner of that revelation would be crucial. She waited until the house fell completely quiet, until the cheerful sounds of their children playing in the corridors had faded into the soft, peaceful rhythm of bedtime routines. Only when she was certain they would not be interrupted did Kate gather the documents. Her hands still trembled from the emotional confrontation with Charles as she walked into the room where William sat, completely unaware that his entire understanding of his family and history was about to be fundamentally altered. William greeted her with a tired smile, the kind that comes at the end of a long day filled with obligations and public duties. But that smile vanished the instant he saw Kate's expression. She said nothing at first, allowing the weight of the moment to settle between them. Instead, she simply placed the envelope on the table and stepped back, giving him space to process what was coming. William stared at the envelope as though it might explode if he touched it. He seemed hesitant to reach for something he somehow instinctively knew could unravel the only version of his family he had ever been able to trust. He picked it up slowly, his fingers tracing the edges of the papers with extreme care. His eyes began moving across the lines of text, taking in Diana's name, the laboratory stamp, the genetic results presented in clinical scientific language. Kate watched as his entire posture transformed before her eyes. The blood visibly drained from his face. His shoulders tightened with tension. And then came silence, but it was not the silence of disbelief or confusion. It was the silence of a man finally confronting a ghost that had always lingered just beyond the reach of his conscious memory. His lips parted slightly as if words were forming, but nothing emerged. Instead, a single tear slid down his cheek, a silent confirmation of something that had been buried for far too long. When William finally found his voice, it was not to deny what he was reading or to question its validity. Instead, he began to speak about memories, fragments from his childhood that suddenly made terrible sense in this new context. He talked about Diana's late-night visits to his bedroom when he was young, visits that seemed to happen most frequently during her most difficult periods. He remembered her whispered fears, spoken in the darkness as she held him close. Her embraces always lingered longer than seemed necessary, as though she was trying to communicate something through physical presence that she could not safely say aloud. William recalled her warnings, seemingly strange at the time, about not trusting appearances. She had made cryptic statements about truth, about how no one would protect certain realities unless you had the courage to do so yourself. At the time, these nocturnal conversations had seemed like the confused ramblings of a heartbroken woman struggling with her deteriorating marriage and her position within an unforgiving institution. Young William had comforted his mother without fully understanding the depth of what she was trying to tell him. Now, decades later, those fragmented warnings revealed themselves as instructions, carefully planted seeds of truth that she hoped might someday take root and grow. Then came the anger, not expressed through loud outbursts or violent gestures, but steady and consuming in its intensity. William's fury was directed at his father for allowing this secret to decay beneath the palace floors for so many years. He felt rage toward the monarchy as an institution for demanding silence in exchange for survival, for requiring that personal truth be sacrificed, on the altar of public image. Most painfully, he directed anger inward at himself for never asking more questions, for never pressing harder when Diana's eyes had seemed to plead for someone to simply listen and believe her. The sense of betrayal did not merely rest on his tongue as bitter words. It poisoned everything William thought he had understood about loyalty, legacy, and truth. His entire framework for understanding his family and his role within it had been built on foundations that were now revealed as fundamentally unstable. And then Harry entered his thoughts, unbidden but inevitable. His younger brother, the one who had always been labelled the black sheep, the rebel, the one who never quite fit the mold that the institution demanded. William saw his brother through entirely new eyes at that moment. What if Harry's defiance had never been simple rebellion or attention-seeking behaviour? What if the rage Harry had carried for years was not merely about the institution itself, or about the treatment of his mother, but about some deeper truth vibrating beneath their feet that Harry had somehow sensed, even if he could not articulate it? The possibility that Harry's instincts had been correct all along, that his inability to conform had stemmed from perceiving something fundamentally wrong in the official narrative, was almost too much for William to process. Suddenly, William was not just grieving for his mother and the pain she had endured. He was grieving for a lifetime built on carefully maintained lies, for relationships shaped by secrets no one had acknowledged, for a version of himself that had been constructed according to rules and expectations that were themselves based on deception. Kate moved closer to where William sat, placing her hand gently over his in a gesture of solidarity and support. She leaned in and whispered words that refused to let him retreat into comfortable denial or passive acceptance. "Don't let Diana's truth die with us," Kate said, her voice cracking with emotion but her eyes fierce with determination. She was not begging or pleading. She was invoking a promise, calling on William to honor his mother's memory by finally bringing her hidden truth into the light. But even as William wrestled internally with the conflict between duty to the institution and love for his mother's memory, another voice emerged from the palace shadows, one that had survived through decades of carefully cultivated silence and was now prepared to strike back. Camilla did not announce her arrival with dramatic knocking or formal requests for entry. She did not need such conventional approaches. She simply appeared in the doorway of Kate's private quarters like a shadow that had always been present, patiently waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. Her presence carried an unsettling quality, the demeanor of someone who had spent decades learning how to survive and thrive within palace walls by mastering the art of subtle manipulation and strategic silence. Kate had barely begun to process William's emotional breakdown when she looked up and saw Camilla standing there, composed and uninvited. The Queen Consort stepped into the room as though she possessed every right to be there, as though this confrontation was simply another scene in a play she had been directing all along. From the calculated glint in her eyes, Kate understood immediately that this was indeed Camilla's moment to assert control. "I heard you have been busy," Camilla said softly, her tone almost conversational, even kind on the surface. She did not frame it as a question requiring confirmation. She was simply stating a fact, making clear that she had been aware of Kate's investigation and discoveries all along. She sat down without being invited, crossing her legs with casual grace that came from a lifetime of perfecting the art of appearing unthreatening while wielding considerable power. Camilla's eyes moved to the papers scattered across Kate's desk, taking in the DNA reports, the photographs, and Diana's letters with a knowing nod that sent chills through Kate's body. "You found him," she said calmly, as though discussing something as mundane as the weather forecast. In that simple statement, the entire game was exposed. Camilla had known all along. This was not new information shocking her into reaction. This was confirmation of something she had been managing and controlling for years. What followed was not denial or defensive maneuvering. Instead, Camilla delivered what could only be described as a masterclass in quiet, ruthless control. She spoke about choices, about the brutal calculations required to survive within what she called the royal machine. She admitted without any apparent hesitation or guilt that she had discovered Diana's secret years ago, long before Diana's death. But rather than expose it or use it destructively, Camilla had employed the information strategically. She had used it to bargain, to negotiate. Her position to secure her eventual place beside Charles on a throne that had once belonged, at least in the public imagination and emotional reality, to someone else entirely. Power, Camilla said with cold clarity, is not about truth. It's about what you can keep hidden. Then came the warning, delivered with casual precision and laced with carefully disguised venom. If Kate dared to speak publicly about what she had discovered, the monarchy would not be the only casualty of that revelation. Camilla leaned forward slightly, lowering her voice just enough to create an atmosphere of false intimacy, almost as though she were offering motherly advice rather than making threats. She began referencing Kate's own family with pointed specificity. She mentioned Kate's parents and their modest middle-class beginnings, the scrutiny they had already endured simply for having a daughter marry into royalty. She brought up Pippa, Kate's sister, and the intense public attention she had faced over the years. Most devastatingly, she invoked Kate's own children, mentioning their reputations and futures with implications that were impossible to misunderstand. Then she turned to William, not with concern for his well-being, but with cold calculation about what scandal would mean for his position and legacy. A scandal of this scale, Camilla whispered, her words chosen with surgical precision, would not just ruin the firm. It would ruin you, your family, everything you have built and protected. And then came the final blow, delivered with a thin smile that never reached her eyes. The press is always hungry, Kate. Don't be the one to feed them yourself. Kate sat completely still throughout this threatening monologue, every muscle in her body coiled with tension, even as her face maintained the portrait of royal restraint that years of training had perfected. But inside, a storm raged with increasing intensity. Camilla's words did not frighten Kate into submission as intended. Instead, they ignited something far more dangerous than fear. They sparked absolute conviction, because now the situation was crystallized with perfect clarity. This was not merely about a family secret or historical curiosity. This was about a war that Diana had fought entirely alone, unsupported, and ultimately destroyed by the very institution she had tried to serve. It was a war that Camilla had capitalized on, using Diana's pain and secrets as currency to purchase her own position and power. And now it was a war that Kate understood she had no choice but to finish, regardless of the personal cost or institutional consequences that might follow.